I'm with Trevor Caithness at Ben Warden in East Gippsland, and we're talking about forestry and good neighbours and agriculture. Trevor, how are you, mate?
Good, Tim. Great to see you.
Thank you very much for having us on the channel, mate. We've had some prior discussions around forestry and the expansion of forestry into agricultural land, and a lot of that's being driven by carbon credits and ACCUs and an unequal weighting between forestry and agriculture. You're the former chairman and currently the CEO of Gippsland Agriculture Group, and you've got a couple of things that you're really trying to discuss with the forestry people.
For sure.
And with farmers. What are the issues that you see coming forward for people who are perhaps potentially next door to a farm like this one that's just been sold off for a major forestry update?
Yeah, look, I think it's one of those issues that we need to be very aware as these forestry developments go on of what impact they're going to have on the neighbouring farm. There's a lot of talk quite often from within the forestry companies that they've done a lot of work with consulting the community in the region.
And it depends how you define community, doesn't it?
Absolutely. But to me, the people that are going to be influenced the most or affected the most are going to be those immediate neighbours of those properties as they go into trees.
And are you seeing much of that consultation happening?
I'm seeing them sit down to have a conversation, but I'm not convinced as yet that they're taking it on board.
Right. So what are the issues that need to be discussed with neighbouring farmers? What are the issues that you would like government to take more notice of with this current expansion of forestry?
Look, I think, you know, there's a few key issues. There's fire threat. So most of dryland Australia, we all know, fire can be a major issue. So some of the discussions we've had is that, you know, perhaps it would be good policy for, if this is the boundary line we're on right now, that there be a buffer zone of say 50 or 100 metres.
Which doesn't always occur.
That's right. It's quite often we see these plantations right up to the edge of boundary lines. So at least if there is fires, there is actually a buffer zone there that can be not only maintained prior to the fire, but actually somewhere to fight the fire before it runs out onto neighbouring properties. And the other big issue is, I think we're going to finish up with a scenario where a lot of these forestry development blocks are going to breed the wildlife and the feral animals and everything, and then the neighbouring farmer is going to be responsible to feed them. And so that's going to be a huge burden on those neighbouring farmers when they've got 1,000 acres or so beside them that literally is just a breeding ground for kangaroos, deer, wombats, wallabies, everything you can imagine, and then hence they're coming out onto neighbouring properties where they're trying to actually have some good pastures.
Now you're also, as a farmer, your business is to take on new properties and develop them. Yep. And you have a general rule that you won't take on a property that you can't double the stocking rate on in 2 years.
Correct.
You're seeing some issues with properties coming out of forestry, particularly with the health and the quality of the soil. They're getting high carbon credits, but it's coming at a cost of the soil, isn't it?
It's definitely coming at a cost of the soil, Tim. What I'm seeing is when those properties have come out of forestry and you're starting to look at a soil test, and a soil test at depth, so not sometimes perhaps just the top 4 inches, you're seeing really depleted nutrients. But probably one of the most concerning things is actually starting to see some really high elevated aluminium levels. Now, I think the jury's still out where that aluminium's coming from, but it's much higher in the areas where it's actually grown the trees than it is in the areas that have been on buffer zones or growing pasture. So there's something going on there.
There's always going to be a risk of destroying the soil when you grow a monoculture, isn't there? Multi-species is definitely the way to go, whether it be in our pasture management, our grazing systems, or our forestry.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's well proven now. There's not many people that would go and plant a pure ryegrass and nothing else to go with it, and I think it's no different with every other form of agriculture, and these monocultures of radiata pine or blue gums or whatever's going in, tend to create a very sterile environment, I believe.
Well, we're standing right in front of a farm here that's recently been sold. How many hectares here are going to radiata pine?
Well, there's about 1,000 hectares in this property, and so What percentage I'm unsure of is going to go in, but I would imagine they would be hoping to get as high a percentage as possible of this property into pines, and I believe there appears to be quite an appetite from the plantation companies, and a lot of that appears to be coming from some very attractive government incentives. So they're getting an incentive package to help them actually cover some of the costs of the planting, and then they're getting incentive packages for the carbon offsets as well. It'd be lovely, Tim, if we could see some incentives into agriculture that actually produces food for people to eat, but we don't seem to be able to attract that sort of interest.
Not yet, anyway.
Perhaps we're not hungry enough.
So, Trevor, it's one thing to be aware of the issues that pastoralists face when there's other operations beside them next door, but it's another thing to do something about it. Gippsland Ag Group is currently doing demonstrations of different types of fencing that are appropriate for those situations.
Yeah, look at this fence here, Tim. This would be an outstanding fence as an option for if you did happen to have some forestry activities alongside to try and keep some wildlife on one side of the fence and your livestock on the other side. And it's certainly going to be a continued issue of how we have neighbours that potentially will be putting a lot of pressure onto our pastures and crops, and some of these fences look like they could be a great option.
Well, with changing times comes changing technology, and these fences, even though they look complicated, are actually cheaper than your traditional mesh fencing because you're replacing 2 out of every 3 posts with a plastic dropper. So they're not a bad investment once you get your energiser set up right. And you're trialling several different heights. You've got a 1600, a 1300, an 1100, and you've also just got a standoff on a standard fence as well. Yes.
So it certainly gives a lot of options there for producers to come and have a look at, and certainly some of those higher set fences, I think, would really be not only a great barrier as far as the power running through them, but just the visual barrier of that little bit of height as well would certainly help in a lot of our areas.
Absolutely. So the good thing about Gippsland Agricultural Group having this demonstration fence is that anyone in the district can come and have a look.
Absolutely, and that's what Gippsland Ag Group is all about. It's just enabling farmers to come in, see what's being displayed on site, and see whether they've got a space for that in their own farming business. And we really say thanks to Gallagher for putting this together on site for us, because it's going to be great for farmers to come in and actually eyeball it themselves and have a good look. Well,
thank you, mate, for setting up such a fantastic community resource, a fantastic community group. You're not only advocating for agriculture in the Gippsland area, but you're backing it up with science. You're doing trials, you're doing AI trials, you're doing soil trials, pasture trials. Everything's relevant to growers in this area, including your fences.
No.
Guys, get involved in Gippsland Ag Group. If you're anywhere in Gippsland, the link is in the description. Get on to Trevor. He's a good man and they're here to help. Thanks very much, mate.
Good on you.